Thank you,
Hey,
Jay
Barbara.
Baba, and welcome everybody. We have somebody here from England, and that would be Tanya. So anyway, welcome from across the pond, and everybody else is either local or cast across the United States somewhere. We have a couple of people from Mariposa who have been involved at Meherana. That's Christy and Cheryl's one of our volunteers. We have Ann Barker, who's on our board, Scott Tower, former board chair, our wonderful Gay Dunn, who creates these beautiful images to send out across the planet. So, and Irma, a former volunteer and a poet in her own right, and Hugh Huntington, who's not visible right now, who's currently on our board. So, gosh, I want to welcome you all today and tell you a little bit about what we have planned. You can think of it a little bit like improvisational theater because we have not rehearsed this. I have spoken independently to Christy and Bob, and they know each other from before, but we didn't have any consultation together. But what happens for me when I get a prompting from Baba is kind of a jab in my ribs. And so several months ago, I got a pretty sharp jab in my ribs that this should be something that should be offered out to the Baba community across the world. And it took shape slowly. And originally, this was scheduled for the 26th of April. And as it turned out, our beloved Debbie Mordine was ill in the hospital, and she died the day before this program would have been held. So I want to remember Debbie and also thank two people, Heather Mashandaro, who had the original creative impulse to start a Baba Zoom program and do it every other month, and Debbie Nordine. The two of them paired up to create this program. I also want to thank Angela Chen for hosting us every other month on this program that connects around the world. So thank you, everybody. Now, one thing that's apparent to me is that Baba's reach is everywhere, and I'm going to tell you a super quick story, kind of unrelated to Mehera and Meherazad, but it happened to me yesterday. As I was standing in line for coffee at Whole Foods. It's my cappuccino habit. There was a gentleman in line and we were waiting and we started talking. And this person is not a Baba lover, but we started asking each other, what do you do? So I told him about Meher Baba's archive here. And he said, that's funny. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, because we had a friend visiting us once upon a time. And she had a photo of Meher Baba and she decided to go on a huge trip and she left everything behind, including this photograph, which we have kept. And one time when my daughter had lost a tooth, I decided just for fun, I would leave $5 under her pillow. And for some reason, I would copy Baba's picture and put it under there too. And he said, when my daughter woke up the next morning, she had $5 in one hand and Baba's photo in the other hand with a very puzzled look on her face. And she said, look, I got $5, but I never thought the tooth fairy was a guy before. I'm so surprised. So in any case, Baba's reach is everywhere, and Mehera is certainly a part of that reach. So why do we come on and listen to these stories? As I was thinking about it this morning, I think that stories bring us into ourselves differently. I think stories help us to quiet all of the random thoughts and help us to experience the love in our hearts. And so our plan today is this, and as I said, it's an improvisational event, so please think of it that way. I'm going to give you a brief history of both Bob and Christy, who had very different and unique roles involving Mehera, the mandali, and Meherazad. And in a way, I would say maybe a masculine and feminine perspective. Although Bob did say to me, I can't represent all men. I can only talk about my own experience. So I said, well, that's That's fair enough. Um, so subsequent to that, we have a slideshow for you with photos shared by both Bob and Christy, and a couple of video vignettes to bring Mehera closer in to us today. Finally, when I spent time in India, I'm just going to show you this little bouquet. I was inspired to buy these beautiful roses yesterday. And for some reason, I put them in this flowered teapot. I've never done it before, and I've never cut long stem roses. It seems a little bit sacrilegious, but I felt like I needed to do it. And on the way to my table, one of the petals fell. And I don't know if some of you remember this from India, but I always heard the mandali say when a petal falls, it's a sign of Baba's presence. When the garland slips a little, it can be a sign of Baba's presence too. So with that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Bob and a little bit about Christy. So Bob currently lives in Athens, Georgia. He was trained as an MD, an internal medicine doc. He grew up for his first 6 years in a small town on the bayou in Louisiana. And then his family moved to Milwaukee. Fast forward to Harvard in the 1960s, where Bob studied something all of us want to do, right? Ancient Chinese history. No medical training at all in his undergraduate years. And during that time, he saw a poster of Mayor Baba in a window in a restaurant. And I think what he said was he hitchhiked to go hear this guy named Alan Cohen talk about Mayor Baba. And he thought, that guy is so cheerful. Like, he's a little too happy to be talking about somebody that's that important. Shouldn't it have a little more seriousness to it? In any case, he finished his studies and made his first trip to India in 1972. Subsequent to that, he taught in the inner city for 3 to 4 years, taught high school 1 year, and he was cured of being a teacher, and he decided, I'm going back to school. With no science in his background, he did this amazing thing of finishing all his prerequisites for medical school in 1 year, having had no science courses at Harvard at all. So that gives you a little idea of the power of his focus at times. And after he had completed a year of medical school, he had heard that GoHair was letting students come to work in the clinic. And so during his summer break, he went to the dispensary and had some happy weeks of working with GoHair and Kitty. And I believe that was in monsoon season. And so if any of you have ever ridden out to Meherazad on a bicycle, either in absolute heat or absolute thundering rain, you know what that experience can feel like. So in any case, he then returned to India. And over time, I'm skipping over a lot of personal history. He began consulting regularly with GoHair on the phone regarding the health of the mandali. And so he has a very unique and intimate perspective about the mandali's lives and their health. And then the rest is history. And I'm going to turn to Bob in a minute. Bob, I hope I didn't display too many inaccuracies, and you can correct them if I had. Now I want to tell you a little bit about Christy Pearson. And I am always intrigued by people's personal stories and the way Baba takes every single thread of a person's life and makes use of it in a future none of us can imagine. So Christy Pearson was what she called an LA girl. That means she grew up in Southern California, not too far from the beach, I think, maybe on the beach, near the beach. And she grew up with an older brother. She, more stories about how she came to Baba, but in any case, here's what I learned about Christy, and I've known Christy for over 40 years at Mehera and beyond. Here's what I found out. She had a couple babies. She left her marriage and remarried Chris Pearson, whom you all probably, if you don't know, have heard about him. And she received a degree in business administration with a focus on finance. And she said to me, quote unquote, math was just always easy for me, unquote. And since math was never easy for me, that I found that sort of intriguing. Anyway, Christy went on to become the controller for an ad agency. She negotiated contracts. She was in charge of personnel, hiring and firing. In another one of her professional pursuits, she brought a company out of bankruptcy and ended up having to go to the LA bankruptcy court in order to clean up their company, which she did successfully. She doesn't now, but she used to wear business suits. And that was one of Christie's past lives. She moved to Mariposa in 1990 with Chris and had bought land there in 1979. And you all have heard of Meherana if you haven't been there. She was one of the very active participants in founding that spiritual organization that Bao was so deeply involved in. When she moved to Mariposa, she said to Baba, I'm going to take the first job I can get. And she became a labor negotiator with the county. And then she was hired by the school district. She worked for the superintendent. She did labor relations, financing. And her coup de grace was working very hard to push through a grant for a multi-purpose room for an impoverished school in Mariposa. She went to many meetings. She went to Sacramento. And by the end of this impoverished district had the plans to build a multi-purpose room, which has made all the difference for children who can look out the windows of their school now instead of just seeing the walls. She's also spent a great deal of time in India helping to organize Amartithi. And she had a medical focus at times, helping to care for various mandali, including Mansari, Gohair, and Balnatu. Currently, she has plans to go back to India to work with Chris and a crew on refurbishing and supporting the verandas on Mara's porch, which maybe she'll tell us a little bit more about. So with that intro, let's all just consider all the threads in our own personal lives that have led us to come here today. It's something of a mystery, and let's see what we can find out as we hear more about Mehera and Meherazad. So with that, Ashley, our administrative assistant, we're going to start a PowerPoint screen share. And Ashley, maybe you could guide people if they want to see the speaker when we're looking at the slides, you could tell them what to do.
Yes, so I suggest that you guys go to the top right of your screen, click the view button, and then change it to speaker. There should be a big screen at the bottom and then everyone's little pictures at the top. Okay.
Thank you to Gay Dunn for this beautiful slide. So you can go forward, Ashley. So the gates at Meherazad, which any of us who have been to India, it's one of the first things you see as after you come down that dusty road lined with trees. And here's Baba in front of those beautiful turquoise gates. And here we have the women. So the best I know, that would be, I think in the red sari on the left is probably Mansari. And then going off to the right, there's Mani. I think that might be Nargish next to her. Then Katie, Khorshid, Mehera, and Arnavas with Baba sitting in the chair in front.
And Naja's in the back.
And there's Naja peeking out.
Little
Thank
Naja.
you. Okay.
And I think I know those, that's who they are. You're
Okay.
right.
Okay, good. All right. And here is Mehera next to the Umar tree. So those of you who have been in India, maybe at various times, have seen this tree. And this was at a time when Mehera was in deep grief about Baba dropping his body, and she would look out her bedroom window each day and be just extremely tearful. And one day as she was looking out, she noticed that there was an image in the tree that became clearer and clearer, an image of Baba's beautiful face. And she would have a practice of going out each day and putting flowers into the tree bark to remember him. We'll hear Mehera now praying to Baba in front of his photograph. Oh. Oops. Let's see. Ashley, can you play that again and get the sound? Because I didn't hear it.
Let me see.
Okay.
Let me love you as you ought to be loved always, Baba. May all your lovers be true to your love for them, Baba. Beloved Avatar, may Baba be there.
Did you hear it that time, Evie?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We're going to play one more. This one's a little less distinct, but what you'll hear Mehera talking about is what Baba's singing was like. I think she's going to describe here, he played a drum and then he had a sitar, and he began singing in Marathi, which was where these pilgrims had come from. And at the very end, she talks about Baba being able to communicate in 6 different languages.
That building is a pity. It is not there. The government had it pulled down, but it's a real pity because I had Baba's darshan in that room, and many others had Baba's darshan, but first time darshan in that room. That was the place where Baba, very first when he came to Meherabad, he stayed in that place, and he played the drum. He played the drum, and he sang on the sitar, Qawwali songs, and bhajans, composed by the perfect master. Very beautiful bhajan, and the village people used to come to Baba to listen to the songs Baba sang so beautifully, and they were very, what would you call it, happy and surprised to know that Baba can sing such beautiful songs in their language, Marathi. Baba could sing in Marathi because Baba, he knows 6 languages, and it comes very natural to him, and he sings Marathi. That building is.
Oops. Okay, Bob, I'm going to turn to you. These are photos you took, so why don't you lead us through this next series? You'll see what they are. I know they're very familiar to you because of the many trips you've taken to
Right.
India.
So that's Baba's chair in Mandali Hall at Meherazad. And that door goes onto the men's veranda. That's looking down Mandali Hall toward Baba's chair from the door that goes to the women's side, the length of Mandali Hall. That's the blue bus where Baba and a number of women drove up and down India during the late 30s, early 40s, and then it was brought here at Meherazad, and Baba used it in the Great Seclusion in 1949, I think. Pindu, one of Baba's closest disciples and actually a neighbor growing up. He told me once that he would awaken at night sometimes and hear Baba singing when he was a child.
One thing to add is I don't know if you all know how Pendu got his nickname from Baba, but he used to stand up and sway from side to side. So Baba called him Pendulum, and then it was shortened to Pendu.
Also, he's Baba's cousin, brother of Naja.
Right.
And yeah.
Michal, did you want to say something?
No, sorry. I wanted to say it was his cousin, but I just by mistake put my hand up.
Okay, okay.
There's the men's veranda looking down toward the blue bus at the very end in Mandali Hall before it. And looking out the same area from the yard. That is Arnavas's grave, which is behind, on the women's side, behind the houses there a little bit. You can see it. That picture, I think, is taken from the steps going into Baba's bedroom.
Hmm.
There she is. That's the other person buried at Meherazad, which is Kakabaria. He was an early and longtime disciple of Baba's and died in 1970, if I'm reading that right, or 69. 69, I think.
Yeah.
And these are the other three things that I know of that are buried there, the three of Baba's pets. They're buried behind the what used to be the old dispensary building there at Meherazad. And Goher told me that when she was going to build the dispensary, she was just going to build it over these graves and Kakabaria's graves. But they restrained her.
So just to insert a little story about Mastan, he was Baba's last dog pet. And after Baba dropped his body in January 1969, Mastan was grief-stricken. And he'd wander from room to room looking for Baba. At one point, he circled around the table where Baba used to sit in the dining room. He went into Baba's bedroom and circled around the room. And very shortly after that, he stopped eating. He became very thin, and he just simply collapsed one day. And that was about 3 months after Baba dropped his body.
That is the hair that was mounted by Harry Kenmore. The hair is from Baba's early days, and it's in his room. It's displayed in his room on the dresser there.
Bob, you want to tell the story?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the first time I visited India, so this is 72, Mehera, I went with my wife at the time, Judith Shotwell, and Mehera asked the two of us if we'd like to have a tour of Baba's house. Of course, we would. So she took us around to Baba's house, just the two of us, and showed us various things. And when she came to this hair, mounted hair, she said, you know, I was looking at this hair and I knew Baba's face was in it somewhere. And I looked and I looked and I looked, and then I saw it. And then she stood back and she said, now you find it. so we looked and we looked and we looked and we looked. And just as I was about to give it up, I saw his face, and Judith saw it at exactly the same time. We both went there. And Mara laughed and she said, it's nice that you found it together. I had never been able to find his face since then, incidentally. It's in there somewhere, I'm sure. This is in my trip in '79 when I was working in the dispensary. And I would, as Evie said, I'd ride my bike up there and work in the dispensary. And then I'd have time afterwards, often when there were no other pilgrims there, to spend time with the mandali, including the women. And this is a photo from that time. I'm in the middle there, in case you don't recognize me, the tallest person. And you can see who the others are named there.
You want to name them for us?
Sure. So Katie, and then Pendu with the canes, then me, then Balnatu, who was living in Meherazad by that time, and Erich, Rano, Alaba, and that's Jimmy Mystery, who happened to actually just be walking by. That's, if you know Falu, that's his father, or was his father. He was a good chess player. This is the outside of a card that Mehera sent to Judith and I and for Christmas in '73. Beautiful, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And this is what she said. Jai Baba, she writes, Dear Judy and Bob, and all Baba's dear children near you. And then the printed part you can read probably. May the Christ child grant you a blessed, peaceful Christmas and an abundance of happiness throughout the new year. And she continues writing, then in beloved Baba's precious love from your Meherazad family, love to you, his dear children, in his eternal love, Mehera.
Mm. Wow.
In '79, after when I was my last day, I was working in the clinic, and I was riding through the monsoons, and you know what traffic is like in India anyway without monsoons. So Goher came over to me. I was getting ready to leave. She took my hands and she looked up and blew me a kiss. First of all, she was a very short woman. If you never met her, she looked up and blew me a kiss. And then she looked down at my hands that she was holding and she said, Baba, bless these hands and make them healing hands.
Oh.
So then she wanted me to go over to the women's side. So I staggered over to the women's side and Mehera was there. And Mehera came over to me holding a string with a package at the bottom, as she would often do when she was giving something to men. And she gave me the package. And she said, when she gave it to me, she says, you have pleased Baba. And that's the framed photograph that was in the package. And that's next to my bed. Right now, it's actually right here. But normally next to my bed.
Hold it up for us again, Baba. I mean, Baba.
All right.
Bob.
Baba around here somewhere.
He's somewhere. Wow. Lovely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Right. Beautiful picture of Mehera. This photo was given to me, the framed, not framed, it was the print was given to me by Mani. This is after Mehera had left her body. And it's hanging somewhere in one of my rooms.
Mm. So let's go back. Ashley, go back to the one that, yeah, to that one. So we have some room here, Bob, just for you to share other reminiscences of all of the time that you spent in India, and in particular at Meherazad. And I've always felt that you had a very unique perspective because of the kind of time you spent there, the role you had working in the dispensary so closely with Gohair and afterwards, and your return visits always to Meherazad.
Let's see, am I muted? No.
Mm-mm.
Right. So I actually wanted to, if you don't mind, quote something that from the preface to Mera's book, Baba Loved Us Too, which were stories that she had told about Baba's pets, various pets. And in the preface, Meru writes, seeing her smiling warmly and talking animatedly to the Baba lovers who visited his home of the one topic that filled her life. Few could have guessed at that deep longing in her heart to be reunited with her beloved. She was incidentally born in 1907, and she met Baba when she was 15 in 1922 and joined him permanently at Meherabad in 1924, which is 101 years ago. Pretty amazing. Just to go back to me for a second, I was an atheist. I was lost. This was in college. I was drugs and everything else, and wasn't interested in God as such, but somehow got interested in the works of Lao Tzu, who was early ancient Chinese philosopher. And through that, my heart began opening to the possibility that there was more meaning. So I thought, well, I better find a master. So at that time, this is in Cambridge, there was a perfect master passing through town every week. So it was just a matter of, who to go to. So I was hitchhiking, as she said, and as Evie said, I was hitchhiking and got a ride with this guy that gave me this poster. And to this day, I don't know who he is or was. I have no idea. But I went to the meeting, and when I left, I knew that Meher Baba was God. Whatever God was, he was it. Went and got a copy of the 3-volume discourse and read through that and had some confirmatory experiences. So I decided by this, that was in 69. Now that was in October, so everything had already happened. Baba had dropped his body, the great darshan that he had planned had happened. It was just, oh well. Anyway, so in 72, Judith, my wife, who was a Baba lover by then, and I went to India, and just meeting Mehera was a remarkable experience. I'd never been with anyone like her. It was stunning, actually, being there with her on the porch. She was obviously fully focused on Baba in a way that was inclusive. Everything she did, you could see her focus actually was on him, her beloved. On the other hand, she, had been cloistered her entire life, right? She came to the ashram in 1924, and Baba kept her away from men and men away from her that entire time until the very end of his advent, when the mandali were introduced to her, the men mandali. I mean, she was that isolated. So there was a little bit, I think, not that I'm in a position to judge, but I think she was a little uncomfortable at first being with men. I mean, she had never done it. So it was a new thing for her. But be that as it may, it was stunning to be with her in any moment. So it didn't matter. But I never looked her in the eyes. I felt we were all warned, of course, not to touch her. That means the men, or get too close. But I just felt like she was uncomfortable. I didn't want to, like when we were talking or having a conversation, look into her eyes. So that marked my relationship with Mehera, for the other times I would see her in the future. At the end of our stay there, she came over and she brought a little box that had some Baba pins in it. And she said, these are blessed by Baba, so pick one. So I started to pick one, and she says, no, don't pick that one. Pick this one. And she pointed to an oval pin there. And so I took that one. And she said, the way Baba would bless the pins is he would put his hand on the box, a little box, but he put his hand on it. But this one he held up and looked at. So, I mean, I thought I was intuitive, but obviously I missed the boat entirely. And that I've carried that pin since then. So that's a long time. Except about a month ago, I actually gave it to a friend who has terminal illness, Baba lover, and wanted something like, the Baba had touched or blessed or something to be able to carry with him. So he has it now. Whether I ever see it again or not, I don't know. But it was fun. It was a good ride. Shall I keep going?
Sure.
Okay. Unfortunately, during that first day, I got this like diarrheal illness that people get, when they go to India or used to get. And I just couldn't, it was the whole time. I just couldn't go back after I got home. That's why I didn't go for another 7 years until 79 when I moved in, worked in the dispensary. So I missed 1972 to, until 1979 with the mandali. But fortunately, it's a timeless, if you've all been to Meherazad, it's absolutely timeless being there. And Baba's presence in his home is so strong. So, and I noticed in 79 and in subsequent visits with Mehera that she was more comfortable, with me at least, and I think with men in general. Not that her order was not to touch a man or be touched by him. So sometimes people would be so relaxed speaking to her. I'm talking about guys. I could never figure out how they did that. In fact, I saw someone actually was sitting next to her in Mandali Hall on a Sunday, I guess, when there was a Sunday program. And he actually touched her knee, just in the enthusiasm and comfort of being there. And it's like, shoot, I mean, that's too bad. And I'm sure somebody has told me they embraced her once, a guy. So anyway, she had a tough time because she had to monitor us as well as be herself. And of course, it was easy to be herself because she was with Baba. So whatever happened, happened. I was consulted about her illness, but I wasn't actually physically involved before she died. She had which I couldn't find a photo of, she had a brain tumor. And her only symptom was that she sort of just gradually got more and more somnolent and went to sleep. But I have a CT scan of the tumor, and it's shaped like a heart. So that's just seemed like Baba's touch with her to do that. If she had to have something, she has a heart-shaped tumor in her brain and has no symptoms other than just drifting off. I have other things I could say, but maybe,
Go ahead.
okay. um, Once when I was there, Mehera came over and she asked me how I was, and I told her. Incidentally, I talked about having that diarrheal disease in 72. I never have gotten sick one day on the many 25, however times I've been back to India since then, not once. So, anyway, she asked me how I was, and I said I was fine. And I asked her how she was, and she said, I'm feeling okay, but I'm feeling my age.
Oh.
And I said, how old are you now, Mira? And she said, I don't remember. It was just so sweet because she was innocent. I mean, in the real sense of innocence, that you are there, you're there only for Baba, and whatever he has happen is what you want to happen. That's the challenge for all of us, is to be like her.
Hmm.
I'll stop there.
Okay. Oof. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Wow. We'll have other opportunities to talk about these things. So if something else significant comes up for you, just give me a holler. And I'd like to go ahead, Ashley, if you could forward one slide and turn us over to Christy. So go ahead, Christy.
Oh, okay. Well, just in this picture, you can see how I was just totally in love with Mara. And she was so sweet about it. You know, she would look me right in the eyes. She would say, "We girls," and just chit chat about this and that. But the first time I went to India in 1977, I was 25. I had two children, 2 and 4 years old. And I just felt very clearly from Baba, after seeing a picture of Mara, that I was to go see Mara. And that was the purpose of my trip to India the first time. And I didn't have my own money at that time, so I took in other young children for a year and did daycare up to 7 at a time, under 5 years old. And after a year, I had enough money to go to India. So I really, I lived up in the mountains, and although I was in LA, I had been to the LA group like once, but I really was sort of on my own. I wasn't familiar with the mandali or the samadhi or anything, but I got a ticket, went to India with the clear purpose of seeing Mara. And when I arrived in Ahmednagar, I stayed at Vilu Villa. And I told Vilu that I needed to see Mara. I felt I can be very one-pointed, and it was all about seeing her because that's what I felt Baba wanted me to do. So I said, I need to see her. And Vilu called up and she said, Mara will see you. So a rickshaw came and I got in the rickshaw by myself and I went out to Meherazad. And when we got there, I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't know about Mandali Hall. I didn't know the Mandali. I was by myself. Um, and so I got out and I walked towards the porch area, and someone, for the life of me, I can't remember who it was, told me to take off my shoes and go in and bow down to Baba's chair. And I did that. But I didn't really feel it was beautiful, you know, but my mind was on Mara. And then I came out and a girl came around the corner. I also can't remember who that was. And she said, Mara will see you now. And so I followed her from Mandali Hall door out by the Blue Bus and the New Life Cavern. And she disappeared, and I found myself looking across, and I saw Mara standing on the porch. No one else was around. And so I cannot remember what happened then, because I love to hear Bob say that he was stunned, because it makes me feel a little better. I was so stunned. I just found myself at her feet, on the ground. I didn't even go on the porch to meet her. I just went to the bottom of the veranda and stood looking at her. And she was smiling at me. She came to the edge of the porch and she looked me deeply in the eyes and she said, "Hello, Christine." And that was it for me. I've stunned. And I've recently been trying to figure out how to say what happened, because I haven't really told my story before, not feeling that I could share it properly or do Mehera justice. But so what happened was, when she said that to me, I was just drawn up into her presence, and I had not anticipated ever someone of that consciousness and that beauty. And so gentle she was, and just, she was so amazing. And I was just stunned. I couldn't even move. And after a moment, she said very sweetly, realizing I was just like having a hard time. She said, "I want you to go back to in front of Mandali Hall and meet a girl who's coming. And then I want you to bring her back to the kitchen, and I'm going to teach you how to make chapatis." So I went back. I don't think I said a word. And so I turned around, and I just was not in this world at that time. So I went back and the girl came. And so she knew where the kitchen was, luckily. And so the two of us went back to the back side of the dining room there where the kitchen is. And Mehera showed us how to make chapatis. And that was just the beginning meeting of my relationship with Mehera, which I'll just say, really the most important and precious thing in my life was my relationship with her, because she showed me how naturally and perfectly to please beloved Baba, as no one else could. And she also showed me more love and welcome than anybody I'd ever met, including my own family. So I spent some time with her then, but it was a very short trip. I had never left my children before overnight, and I think I only stayed 10 days. And then I went home, but I felt very connected with her, and she wrote to me, and, I would write her back. And it was actually later I found out Meru always wrote the actual notes, but they were dictated by Mehera. So then, also on that trip, I had one other interesting experience. In 1977, the women would come to Baba's Samadhi once a month. And there were just so few girls there that they allowed us to go inside the Samadhi with the women. So they told us, you can go inside and say Arti with the women. So I went and I stood right next to Mehera. She was like a magnet for me. And they sang the Gujarati Arti, and it just went deep in my soul. I had never heard it. And all the women in there singing it. It was so beautiful. And then we sat down, and Mehera was on the left side, and I was a little towards the aisle, right next, little behind her. And an Indian man came in, and everybody who was there started to take darshan, villager. And what the villagers like to do was step up on the platform and go to the picture at the head of the Samadhi and circle it and then come off the other side. So he started to lift his foot by Mehera, but he had on these loose pants and it looked like he was going to touch her. So I suddenly just bowed down on the platform so he couldn't go there. And then he just paused for a minute and then backed out. And then when we came out, I didn't really think about it, but Monty said to me, "That was quick thinking." It was like little things like that, it was very sweet. Mehera was totally oblivious to the whole thing going on. And I love that you showed the picture when Mehera would have women in for tea. She always prayed for us all and talked to Baba, that wonderful picture of him with his hands spread out. And then I also, she would, if I found myself alone with her, which I often did in my first trips, she would turn to the other picture by Charlie Mills, that it's a full picture and it's on the veranda by the window. And she would just have a conversation with that picture. And I remember thinking, I didn't know you could do that. Just talk to Baba like that, I thought you had to like pray or something, and here's Mary and he was there. His presence was always with her. So for her, it was very natural. And for me, it was just beautiful. And so that's one thing that she showed me, that we can just have our direct contact and talk to him like that. And then in 1979, I returned for a 3-month visit, and I had just married Chris Pearson. And now Chris had been to India too in, I think, 1971, 72. He was 21 years old. And being Chris, he went to the women and said, "Is there anything you want me to do?" Because he renovated homes in Beverly Hills and Palos Verdes, wealthy places. And so he just said, is there anything, I can do for you? So Goher was put in charge of him because she was the household manager. And they had him paint the blue bus and the new life care around. And then after that, he got to come. They had him come in the house and do things. And Mehera wanted that pink in Baba's room, very pink. She wanted pilgrims to see that it was the bright pink. It looked to me, Chris called it Pepto-Bismol pink, but she wanted everybody to see it as it was with him. So then he painted Baba's room, and it ended up over all the years, he probably painted that 4 or 5 times. So now I was married to him, and Mehera was very fond of him. So usually any nice young man that comes and fixes things around the house, they like that. So she gave me some womanly advice about being a new bride. And she told me to keep myself nice. And when I washed my face, to put cream on it right away while it was still wet. And to keep myself always looking nice and neat. And that was interesting to me. I hadn't really thought of that. Of course, I dressed when I went to see Mehera. I always wore a skirt. I dressed nicely, discreetly, And Mehera told me later, after Mehera passed, that Mehera had always held herself with grace and kept herself nice for Baba. And so and then she said the last few days before she was bedridden, she just let it go. And I thought that was very interesting. And so I have tried, and I think Chris has benefited from it, because sometimes if I get irritated, I'd think of Mehera, and then I'd say, "Oh, be nice." So she was very one-on-one like that. And she would chat, she would say, "We girls," she would give us little gifts, bangles, and this and that. And when we took our children back in 1979, Portia, our daughter, was 9, our son was 7. Chris had adopted them, and they were fully his kids. So we took them there, and Mehera really fussed over Portia. She gave her little bangles to wear, and we got her a little sari, and she dressed up for Mehera, and it was a wonderful time. The other thing was, I always liked to be close to Mehera as unobtrusively. Oh, here we go. So here's Portia and Zach with Mehera. And you can see how she's holding their hands so sweetly, the children. And when we took Zach back when he was 13, she still hugged him. So this was 1979 right there. So when I was on the porch with Mehera, I was kind of shy. I never wanted to talk or be asked anything. I just wanted to sit quietly. So I sat down on a footstool on her left side, and I could sit back a little. So I was a little bit out of the way. And her hand would be on the chair right by my face. And I was always looking at her hands are so beautiful. And she had on these two beautiful gold rings. Now, these were 24 karat gold. Oh, see, there's my bench, actually. So you can see my face was about right by her hand. And so I'd look at her rings, and because she'd tell the story of her rings. And you could see the one that Upasni Maharaj gave her was just literally a wire wrapped around her finger. I mean, not a wire, but a piece of gold just wrapped around her finger. And then the one that Baba gave her had a little heart shape on the front. And then once she caught me at it, and she looked down, with her beautiful eyes, and she said, "Do you like my rings?" I said, "Yes, Mehera, I like your rings." And she also would get shy, especially when it was men and women. And in this photo, so I'm on the bench, and then tucked on that side of her behind, she kept notes. And she told me that she would, in the middle of the night, she liked to sit in the dining room by herself, reliving her life with Baba. And sometimes she would make little notes so that when she got on the porch, if she felt a little nervous or, there was a lot of people there, she'd reach back and pull out one of those notes. And so that was just showing how human she was. And when she would tell us, she'd often go into her own space with Baba, and and she wasn't telling a story as much as she was reliving those moments. And so when Baba was suffering a lot, she would just silently, very gently weep, and she would put her hands on her eyes like this. But she'd keep talking. And then sometimes she'd giggle if it was a joyous thing. And that was beautiful to hear. Chris, along with David, recorded a lot of that, all those stories. And of course, they were in her books. And what I was going to try and convey something that I can't thing about Mehera's presence. When I was stunned in the beginning and always with her, it was more gentle later, and I became sort of acclimated to being in her presence. But being the one who loved Baba most and whatnot, she was so pure, you could say the purest soul in the universe. She had what I can only call spiritual freedom. She had no thought of herself at all in the most natural way. So she was always in Baba's presence. She wanted us to love Baba as much as she did. She would, talk to Baba. And of course, there was no one else that was like that, like Mehera, like that. But she was that way in a way that we should all be. It was so natural and yet very strong. So it wasn't anything like dazzling or special. It was just truth. It was just a pure consciousness, as far as I could detect. And she truly wanted every soul to love Baba as much as she did. Her pouring out of love was just It was just so beautiful. So, and I think one thing I wanted to say was, and Bob might echo this, but Mehera's presence is still very strong with me and Baba, and it's growing stronger as the Advent goes. So this was for archive purposes, and I just wanted to say to any young person, men or women, because my husband was also very close to Mehera, she's still available to you. You can reach out to her, read her stories, listen to her tapes, but mainly inwardly, her role, as I understand it, along with Baba, was to be available to us. And my last visit with Mehera was in 1987. And I had both children with me, but Chris wasn't there, and they were teenagers at that time. And that was a different time. But let's see, I think that was, did I forget anything, Evie? I think that's about it. I mean, both Bob and I have experiences of being in Meherazad after Mehera passed. But one thing I'll say is in 1989, when she passed, I won this sweepstakes ticket at the LA Sahavas to go to India. And I was just about to move up to Mariposa, changing jobs. So I told my husband, I think I want to go to India for a longer time. And he said, well, how long? And I said, 4 months. No, I said 6 months. And he said, that's long. So I ended up going for 4 months. And Mehera had, of course, just passed. So it was a very interesting time to be with the women. They were, when Mehera passed, Mehru told me that if we pleased Mehera, we knew we were pleasing Baba. So all of them, if you've ever been there, how they took care of Mehera, they made sure everything they could do for Mehera because they knew they were pleasing Baba. And when Mehera joined Baba, I think it was Mani who said, now it's every woman for herself. It was different. And so they would all sit around the porch themselves and share stories of Mehera and time. And it was such a huge adjustment for them because when Baba passed, they were not allowed to grieve because they had to uphold Mehera, who didn't want to eat, who didn't want to, and so they had to be there for her, especially Mani and Mehru, but all of them. So that was a really, really sweet time. And 6 months after Mehera passed, this would have been in October, I think, they still kept some Zoroastrian customs. And the 6 months, you always had a get together, I'm sure they have another name for it, for the person who died, with the idea that the sharpness of the grief is somewhat abated after 6 months. And instead of just being focused on the end, you could see the person's whole life that you were with them. And so it was a kind of a celebration. And Mani had written that song, the waltz for Mehera, and Heather and all had memorized it, and so they came to Meherabad. Everybody was dressed to the nines. We were all told we had to wear saris. So we all went out and got saris, and the women had on beautiful saris. And Mani was kind of calling the shots then. And so they went inside the samadhi, and Heather and Janet and the whole choir, men and women, made a U around the door and just sang full force. Mehera, can you, that song that Mani had written. So then they went out to the marble that was there, put there for Mehera on top of her. And I was watching Mani. It was so hard. And the first thing she did that really surprised me was she held out her hands and she prayed to Mehera. Mehera, help us to love the beloved as he should be loved. And you know, seeing the women mandali, Mani leading them, praying to Mehera was something that I had not anticipated. It was very beautiful. And then Mani bent down and she just buried herself in the flowers and stayed there quite a while. And then she came up and then of course being Mani, she gave a message from Mehera, and I wrote it down. And what it said is that Mehera had told her to tell the children watching, to tell the children that come after, meaning she passed, that she would be watching them from above. So this was 1989. So people like I see Ashley, you know, she said that I'll be there for you. So I wrote that down. I thought it was very affected me a lot at the time. And I think I'll end with that.
Wow. Thank you so much, Christy. There's such resonance and richness in those.
It's the first time I've ever told it.
And I barely had to arm wrestle you to get you to say yes.
I know.
I think
You
it
know
was,
what I felt after so many years, you know, it's ridiculous how long it's been. So 77, you know, it'll be 50 years in a couple of years that I felt comfortable that I could probably express it meaningfully that would and I had the idea that any young girl could have come and experienced this. It's not that there were so many people closer to Mehera than me, but you never felt that. So I just, you know, wanted to encourage people to reach out to Mehera and realize that she's there for them.
Mm. Mm. I know, Christy, you told me a little story when I was on the phone with you about some young women that had come to Meherana, I think, that had approached you.
Right. And they, you know who it was? It was Michelle and Margie who do that radio show.
Mhm.
And they're so sweet. They're really charming, but they don't back off. You know, they're used to this radio show type thing. And so they're squeezing thing out of me. And I said, I absolutely not will be on your radio show. Not going on the radio show. But I said, I'll think about it. I'll think about saying more. And then when I checked in with Baba and Mehera, I just felt, okay, I have to just keep myself out of it as much as I can, but share their beauty. That I would like to do is share the beauty.
Mm. I feel very strongly, Christy, that you've done that. And in a way, not by leaving yourself out, but by bringing your heart in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Gee, let's all take a couple of breaths on all of that. Whew. So, Christy and Bob, you haven't had much of a chance to interact with each other, but you've heard each other's stories. And I just wonder, in hearing each other's stories, if it prompts you, if your heart is prompted to share anything else that comes to you today as we remember Mehera and Meherazad.
Um, it's a unique experience, and anyone can find the special place because we know Baba is what it's all about. Mehera knew that, and our focus, my feeling is, as long as we remember Baba and try to give everything to him, that we'll eventually meet Mehera, and in the real sense of the word.
Mhm.
But I don't think anyone, as wonderful as it is to have had these experiences and meeting people that were there for however many years, there's no replacement for seeking him inwardly and wanting to be his and trying to give up things that we all cling to. So I mean, in a way, I guess I'm saying no one missed anything. It's of course wonderful, just like most experiences that you have that are special. It's just wonderful, and who would change that, of course. But at the same time, the real treasure is always present, always here, and always can be approached.
Mm. So important to remember that, Bob. Christy, one thing that you said before was that in Mara's naturalness, she would turn to the painting on the porch and just speak to Baba. And I think what you said was, I didn't know you could do that. Speak directly to Baba like that. Do you want to say any more about that? Because I think that ties very directly into what Bob just shared too.
Yeah.
Or maybe share with us, if you want, a little bit about your own personal practice.
Well, one thing Mara said that stuck with me, and I want to say, of course, it goes without saying that my main connection is with Bob, and I've read all of that. I mean, it seems inseparable to me, but so she was telling the story of she was in Nasic and she was young, and Baba was gone for a long time, and going to England in the early days. And so I think there's just one or two people there. And I said, Mara, you must have missed him so much. And she turned and she looked me right in the eyes and she said, Baba's work always came first.
Oh.
And I thought about that. And when you think what she went through on the new life, is that Baba's work always came first. So I think I could fairly say with Bob and we tried to, in whatever came up, to work for Baba in whatever way he had us do, still doing, still going, Bob, right? Yeah. So Chris and I, so after that long trip in '89, I was there and Amar Tithi was coming up, and the Westerners, or overseas pilgrim, as I preferred to call them, they used to stay in hotels, and the Indians would stay in the tents. And sometimes you could stay in with the Indian devotees, but it just was. Bao felt that when people came from Amar Tithi, they wanted to stay at Meherabad. So he asked me if I would do all the accommodations for the overseas pilgrims, if he would see that there was some space available. and I could set up rooms and get someone to feed them and do this and that. Would I do that for Amr Tithi? And I said, sure. You know, no idea what I was getting into. So I did that, and it worked out. People really liked staying. We stayed back in all the quarters where the residents lived, and all the residents had to take someone in. I, I had to go around and see who they wanted in and whatnot. And then we would sleep on mattresses on the floor, and we would had a tent put up, and then we had food there, and we had the medical care and everything. So I did that, I think, for 13 years. And that was an amazing experience to be at Meherabad and be able to help out with people who came at Amr Tithi. And Goher came with Shelley the first time and checked out the rooms to see if they were like up to snuff. So you got a mattress on the floor, you got a pillowcase, 2 blankets and a towel. And so we had them all laid out, and we even put chocolates on the pillow. We would just like little carrying it all the way. And so Goher comes in and she looks at it and she says, "Oh, we should have had it so good." So it passed muster. And so I really enjoyed working with all the residents there. And so we would go back every year for, 2 or 3 months for the season, which was Amr Tithi and Baba's birthday, when they needed the most help. And we had these assigned jobs. And so we would do that. And that was a beautiful thing. We did that for quite a long time. And then Chris would always go to Meherazad because there was always things that still needed to be fixed. And that that's all. He just wanted to be at Meherazad. And it's funny, there's a men and women's side at Meherazad, as Bob knows very clearly still. And Chris only worked on the women's side. So they would have jobs lined up for him, and he would come and, redo the windows, fix some doors, maybe paint a room, maybe build some shade thing, or, whatever they wanted done. And then when the MPR opened, the Meher Pilgrim Retreat up the hill, then I didn't need to do the Amr Tithi work anymore. Because all the pilgrims went up there, and I was ready for that. It was a long 13 years. So then Baba's bungalow, and Chris, meanwhile, he also had redone the inside of Mandali Hall, and the outside of Baba's bungalow, he had it redone, but it was aging. And there were started to be where there was some more major projects that needed to be done. The first major project we did, I'm trying to remember what year that was. Well, it was the same year that the Meher Pilgrim opened. So we re-roofed Baba's roof of his bungalow over his room and over Mary's room, and it's all archival, so everything has to be, all the tiles have to be numbered and put back. And so he brought a crew from here, and then there were some other young men over there who were on the crew, and I did my usual thing where I took on the burden of giving them a second meal, of feeding them, because that would have been too much for the current staff there at Meherazad, just to all of a sudden feed about 7, men. So I was allowed to set up a kitchen in the old clinic building. And so I would make them tea and food, and then I would also help out the girls in the house when it was Pilgrim Day. And so we've been doing that for about 11 years now. And the house, we fixed it up, but now it's structurally, some things have to be done. So Chris has drawn some plans and consulted with a architectural archivist here in the US, and we just actually mailed them to someone to take to India. So there's going to be some more renovation taking place. So now when we go out there, in the beginning, Chris always stayed at Meherazad because Goher took care of him and said he could stay in the clinic, and that means for the rest of his life he can stay in the clinic. But I was with the crew, so I would always go back to Meherazad. But then they let us stay in the quarters out there because it takes a couple months to do any of this kind of work. And so then I was again making them tea and a meal in the morning, and then they'd have leftovers at night. And so we're still doing that. So Meherazad, when no one's there and in the evening, the first time I stayed, I also got into some medical stuff in one of my jobs. So Shelley called me and said, can you come and do a spell with the women? Right then it was I did Mansari, and then I did Balna too, but mainly she was calling about Arnavas. So I would take, there'd be a rotating team of one girl at a time who would help. And so we were under Shelley and under Bob because in the morning at like, I don't know, 5, 6 o'clock, Shelley's outside with her cup of coffee and her phone. And she's also collecting flowers. And she's talking to Bob about all the latest, medical detail. And so I always thought of Bob. I guess he was always there every morning for her when crises, there were waves. And then whatever, she could work out with Bob, then that's what we would do. But so what I would do was really nothing much, is I was a companion to the person. I made sure they had water. I made sure they didn't fall down, helped them do anything they needed to do, kept track of medicines and water. And then if anything came up, I called Shelley. And so that went on, and they were, several of them, the beautiful thing was they were allowed to stay in their bed and pass. And they passed very beautifully. No oxygen, no IVs. They just slipped away. At least the ones I saw. But mainly, I thought that was really wonderful. They had a lot of support. And so I was like just a nursing assistant, kind of. And I was actually with Manu, who's Erich's younger sister, by a year, and very quiet woman. You've probably seen her on the porch and not recognized her. So I was with her the most, and she passed so beautifully in her room where she always was. And her niece, Mehera was there. And she just didn't, what they would do is they just didn't want to eat anymore. They just couldn't. And so they'd sort of gradually just go to sleep. And so that was happening with Manu. She wouldn't eat. And so Mehera said, Manu, do you see Baba? Because her face was so beautiful. And Manu nodded her head. Yes, I see Baba. So that was a beautiful experience to be able to do that hospice work over there. And that's about it.
Thank you, Christy. Bob, anything else from you before we open it to the group?
Nothing that needs to be said. I would say, from what Christine just said, is that I happened to be staying in Meherazad when 3 or 4 of those people passed away. So I was in the room with them when they passed away, and Arnavas included, and Manu for that matter. But that's it.
It's quite a privilege. Okay, so Christy and Bob, I thought what we do is just open the floor to all the lovely people who decided to come today and see if anybody has something they'd like to share. If you would, let's see, Ashley, if you could just clear the, I guess, yeah, okay. So let's see, if you do have something to share, you can unmute yourself. If you have a question for them or something that they've shared today brings up your own connection with Mehera and Baba, the floor is open. And I cannot see everybody at once. Let me see. Can't see everybody at once. So if you have something to share, just unmute yourself and let us hear.
Evie, do you want me
Yes.
to stop screen sharing so we can see everybody?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. That's great. Okay. We have lots of darkened screens, but that's okay. All right. So this has been such a rich sharing today. Yeah, Scott, please unmute yourself.
All right, thanks, Evie.
Hmm.
Thanks, Christine and Bob, for your beautiful reminiscence. It's like being with Mehera and Baba in India, listening to you and the atmosphere that comes with all that. When I first went to India, I didn't have any idea I was going for Baba, but I didn't know anything. I was full of love for Baba and ignorant of most everything else, which I guess theoretically is a pretty good place to be. But I didn't know about the mandali. I really didn't know who was who. And I was on my own, and I spent a night in Pune on the way. I wasn't supposed to, but because of delays and flat tires and taxis and stuff, I spent the night in Pune.
What year was this, Scott?
This was February of '85, just after Amar Tithi. And so I went to Baba's house and went into Baba's room and was incredibly moved by the stone on the floor, which at that time was uncovered and one could touch it. I knew that story of him hitting his head on the stone. And then I spent some time looking at the photographs. And there was a photograph that just went right through me. Of course, all the photographs of Baba, but there was this one small photograph. It was about eye level, a little lower. And I thought, who is that? I have to know who this is. This is extraordinary. And it was a fairly early picture of Mehera on her own somewhere, out, not in Meherazad. And it was that was my first contact with Mehera, was that picture in Baba's room. And I spent 6 weeks there on my first visit until closing, and had wonderful time in Mehera's proximity. Felt very moved by her clear radiance of love for her beloved. And I think, like most men, was a little jealous of the women. It's like, oh, this woman's tea, this woman's this and that. And like, you felt a little bit on the outside as a result of that, and a little bit out of respect for Mehera and whatever the local rules were, holding back a little bit. But nevertheless had a wonderful experience of being in her presence and proximity. And I had what for me was a very nice experience. After I left India that March, I ended up going and visiting a friend of mine who was living and working in Kenya, and had an extraordinary time just being in that environment, out with all the animals. And particularly on my very much honeymoon with Baba, I just felt like I was back in Eden or some, Baba's garden with all of his creatures. And I sent postcards back to India, and I sent a postcard of 2 giraffe to Mehera. And I hadn't, we hadn't had chats or anything, but I wanted to share with her the feeling I had there and the feeling of Baba there. And the next time I was in India, she remembered the giraffes and commented how lovely it was to get that image. And then that was just a little touchstone of connection with her that I remember.
Hmm.
Thank you, Scott. Those are sweet memories. Yes, Michal, please share. Just, yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you both Bob and Christine. Bob, thank you for all the photos that you keep sending you keep taking in Meherazad and sending, so we get them in the trust mail, and it's very beautiful. So now I know who's the one who's doing it. I see your face, so I can connect the name with the face. So thank you for your story. And Christy too. Christy, I remember you in Amartiti also when the NPR was there. And you never got to see anything of Amartiti because you were sitting next to the table and taking care of everyone coming in and out of NPR. So thank you for all the stories that you shared about your work in Meherazad, which were very, very, and in Meherazad and Meherabad, which are very, very touching and interesting. And so, so you actually cooked for all these people? You actually did the cooking, or you oversaw the cooking when they fixed the Meherazad?
Oh, yeah, I only cooked for about 8 people.
But you did the cooking yourself?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It
So
was
like
kind of like camping cooking,
nice, like a little mother of all these people. And I also saw the pictures of when they fixed the roof, and they were walking on the roof. Right? And it looked so beautiful and so touching. So
So just to add to that, I was there at the time,
yeah.
at least for part of the time when they were doing the roofing. So I think I sent some of those photos out.
So you took the pictures of those people walking on the roof, because I don't think that
I did.
such a person like you could be on the roof. Yeah. So yeah, about Mehera, about being stunned. Yeah. She was just an amazing being, and she had this huge soul. So what I figured is that our shyness and our stunnedness and our approach, the feeling when you come to approach her, was because we are used to smaller energy bubbles around each one of us, and she probably had this huge one, so we would feel it from far away, and to approach it was not simple, was not, you'd be bashful. About not looking at Mehera, when Robert said not looking in her eyes, Bauji said he never looked in her eyes. He never brought up his face to look her straight in the face, because they were so used to avoiding to look at her and looking at the women's side. And because she was so sacred, to them. And being Baba's how do you call it? Other side, Baba's Baba's couple, Baba's actually the coming together of them two, being in oneness of the godhood, that she is bringing this feminine side of the godhood, while he's bringing this, actually both sides, but Baba always brought both sides, the feminine and the masculine was in him, but Mehera brought the feminine side very strongly. And just meeting her the first time when I came to Meherabad and Meherazad in 1988, I immediately knew that she was God. I immediately felt that she was fully God. And since then, I feel that they're both in the same kind of status, in the same kind of togetherness. And so I'm not finding the words, but
but you're finding the feeling of it.
yeah, so thank you for your stories. Thank you for coming here, bringing this taste of them too, and Meherazad, and the work then, and taking care of the mandali. And I also remember that it was so touching that every time one of the mandali would pass away or would go through a sickness, that before they would pass away, we would be sent letters and information of the steps that they were going through. And it was so, so touching to feel the care that was taken of each one of the mandali when they were in, and the fact that they were in their own space, that they could pass away in their own rooms, that they could pass away with their own people around them. And so that was also very special. So you gave a taste of that too when you told about the people that you helped transition. And that is so precious too. So thank you very much, Jai Baba, Jai Mehera.
Thank you, Michal. Is there anybody else that would like to share something as a result of today?
Evie, can you share? Did you see Mehera?
You want me to share something about Mehera?
Yeah, if it's okay with you.
Oh, yes, I met Mehera after a 2-year hitchhiking journey across the world, starting in Europe. Probably I was in a space a little bit like the one Bob described, extreme hippie, sort of. And I was in Israel on a kibbutz, actually, when I got the idea that I must go to India and I must find Meher Baba, even if it seemed like maybe he had died. It didn't seem to matter.
What year?
That was 1970. I remember actually meeting, after that dusty journey and many, many, many experiences, which are tales, each one in themselves, arriving there and meeting each of the mandali one by one. And what I remember saying to my travel partner, who became my husband actually in Mandali Hall on that trip, they're like beautiful facets of a stone that has so many multicolors, and each one is so unique. And I remember meeting Mehera toward the end of meeting all of the mandali and just standing there. I don't know, Bob used the word stunning and Christy used the word stunned. And I don't think I even said anything. I just was, I was speechless. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for asking. It all started in Israel, Michal. And for nobody who knows Michal, well, some of you do, she's in Tel Aviv.
Yeah. Thank you, Evie.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I remember I was so shy. I was so shy, and I think that I was so shy because of not only that I didn't know all of them, like Scott said, when I came to Baba, I didn't know anyone, just Baba. I didn't know anything about the mandali. And I didn't even know about Mehera, I think, that time. So when I came, yeah, it was this feeling, you know, that this, you can't just come and approach, you know, you just can't come, you know, naturally like you do to other people in Israel. Anyone who was here, anyone who knows Israelis, know how easy we connect to strangers in the street, you know, in the bus stop and in the shop and everywhere.
That's true in a way, yeah. I don't know, when I hear words like stunned, stunning, silenced, no words, I think it conveys that feeling that because Mehera was so natural and unassuming and totally herself, somehow it invited a response of just being bare, being unclothed in a way, like sort of straight to the heart.
Yeah, it wasn't something that was coming from them. They did not want any borders. Then they did not want anything like that. But I think that I've heard it so many times from others, that the approach to each of them was this kind of feeling of being bashful or being stunned or being speechless or being, so this just gives me the idea that there was something about their huge souls that when we came, we never met such souls, we never met such huge beings. And they were really immense, they were really amazing. And it did not come from them, because they were very approachable and they really wanted to have this closeness and to tell about Baba, and that was their life, that was their mission, that was what they enjoyed doing, especially after he passed away. And he gave them that, he gave them us, so we would take them out of their beef, and they would have to keep telling us all these stories and pouring out towards us with love, and seeing Baba through us, seeing Baba working for them, telling them things through us. And
yes, exactly. It's sort of like Baba gave them himself, and then he said, here comes a bunch of Westerners. Get ready. I see that Paula has her hand up. Paula, you've been waiting. What would you like to share?
Oh, I just want to say this was just such a wonderful sharing, and it's been so delightful, especially to see you, Christine, and to hear stories from Bob, and oh, it just brings back so many incredible memories. My first, I had 3 trips to India in 78, 86, and 96, which I won my trip to through the Berkeley Baba Center in 96. And I got to be there and see Mani for the last time on the porch there, I remember. And it was incredibly special. And I just wanted to say, I've said this before, but when I went to India in 78, like Mehera was just like off limits to me. I mean, I just felt like she was so unapproachable. And when I went in, it was in 86, the women had come up to the Samadhi on this afternoon, and I happened to be up there, and Mehera, she just took my hand and led me around this building up on the hill. And I don't remember what building it was, but I remember there was a little swing inside, like a little
The East Room. Yeah.
Yes. And she was so incredibly personable with me. I got to go to several teas that time. I felt almost guilty, but it was so incredible. And the intimacy of that she gave me as a gift that particular time that I went. And but anyway, I just want to thank you all for your, and Christine, it's so wonderful to see you. I have to
It's
just,
great to see you too,
oh
Fran.
my gosh. I mean, it's just a delight. And it brings about all my memories of Marana, you know, and just those lovely times and taking care of Balji as a nurse, those times that I got to have that experience. And anyway, I just thank you from my deepest heart. And
Jay Baba.
Jay Baba, bye bye.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank Christy and Bob for your willingness to show up today, even though you knew it was kind of an improv day. Just your willingness to say yes and bringing your love for Baba and Mara directly into our time together today. And I am affirmed as we've spent time together today that it's these stories that nourish our hearts and help us each to remember this unique connection that Baba gives every one of us. And we also, I think, get these reminders that he and she are always available to us. I think, as Christy and Bob have so beautifully spoken through their stories, it's not that they're unavailable, it's that we just have to be open. And it looks like Betty would like to say something. Betty, just unmute yourself if you would.
Yeah, hi, DJ Baba. Thank you. Thank you for this subject and the time together with, one thing that about her was this quality that she relived all these experiences that she would tell us about. Her eyes would sparkle and she would just go there. She'd tell it was a remarkable way that and in such detail. Oh my goodness, she just relived the many stories that she told us. It was and brought us along. It was so special.
Mm.
And also the way, she would kiss and love every picture that I remember in the tea room. She'd go around to each picture and just be loving Baba every time, but touch the picture and just be there with him in a way that was just so remarkable. Yeah. hmm And I have a story. I mean, I we all I and I think it's valuable to people with these days when we have stepkids, mixed families. Uh, uh, the one year that my family came, I think we were there together, Christy. We might have been. I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yes, Portia and Sage would go off to town. That's right. Um. Uh. And I've told this story countless times, but it's my most significant story.
Hmm.
For sure. Um, our family, which was a couple of my husband David's kids and a couple of our kids together. Is that right? Yeah. And then one, really, who was a foster child, technically a half brother of theirs, a mixed blended family. And Mara would, she asked, she was getting to know us. She asked who everybody was. Um, and when I got to my uh, foster son, really, Gary, she said, and who he was 10, so he was just under the wire, and he got to go to tea with her, and she would hug him. That was really special. Um, but she said, and now who's this? And I said, I figured foster son wasn't going to be, under something she might know about. So I said, he's my stepson. And she looked at me and she said, I'll never forget.
Mm.
It- she said, no, she said, you must never say it that way. She said, he's your son. And then she turned to him and said, Gary, who's this? Pointing to me. And he, who was just kind of off in a corner, kind of just spacing out on the porch, really, he said, oh, that's my mom. And and she looked at me like, see? Um, and uh, and indeed, he's been a wonderful son all these years.
Oh, Betty, what a
Yeah.
touching story. Thank you so much. That's really sweet. Etzion, your hand is up. Please unmute yourself and keep smiling.
Thank you. I'm Etzion from Israel and used to be friends with Michal. You know her better than you know me, I guess, or some of you. I came to know Meher Baba in 1972 when I met his first disciple in Israel, Kerry Ben Shammai. When I entered her humble Baba room, Jerusalem, I think summer. Then immediately I became Baba realized. He gave me a very powerful experience of who he is. What's very sad about himself, I knew much more than this. And during the 70s, I was sharing often with Kerry Ben Shammai, and she was alone. There was actually no Baba lovers at that time. She said, nobody would come to her. She had it before me. Before I knew her, she, for the record, said she had 3 centers in Israel. And during the 70s, I haven't heard that from her, but I was, of course, had a very powerful personal connection with Baba. It was my daily routine. It came suddenly and not safe. And I was praying to him from time to time to permit me to see his Mehera. Meher didn't know at that time that to ask permission to see his Mehera is beyond me. He know, because when I suspect when he gave me this powerful experience of who he is, then I knew more things behind the veil about the role of Mehera without reading anything. My English was just rudimentary beginning of English. Since I wanted to know more about Meher Baba, so I put a very great deal of energy to study English, etc. And then towards the end of the 70s, I had to take care of Kerry Ben Shammai. She became disabled, and her health was deteriorating. And then one day she ordered me, literally in this fashion, give me an order. She wants to go to India and I have to take her there. And I made all the arrangements of bringing her to India. And there she was pleading before Mani that she wants to stay there for the end of her life. And which, of course, Mani told her I was present at that time. Mani, of course, said it's not possible, etc. And then, either before that or after that, visiting Meherazad, at that time stayed at Vilus, and used to spend the whole day with, it was a very different world those days. And then first time I entering Baba's room. And I was sitting in the corner opposite of Mehera's door and watching with bewilderment at all these people going to a chair, kissing pillows and all this. This guy's was. I had the experience of Meher Baba who he is. So I didn't understand what people are doing. So I was sitting quietly in my corner, just watching all this, and all of a sudden Mehera's door, just straight to me, the door was swung open like this, very forcefully, and she came rushing towards me, straight to me and said, "Why don't you take Baba's darshan?" And of course I obeyed her immediately, right away. And how did she know? Door was locked, there were more people in the room, they were sitting there around, and she went straight to me. She knew what's going on. And then again we came, Myself and my wife came again end of 82, beginning of 83. And then I was on Mehera's porch. And Mehera told me all kinds of stories concerning Baba's unique care for Israel. And I'm also, Israel, we have a non-stop war for the past 120 years, since the beginning of the 20th century. It's a long story, I don't want to bother you with this. It's a different session. Spoke about this, I gave here sessions before, spoke about this. It's part of all these problematic issues of all these past advents. Now, presumably a few advents are colliding here in the Middle East, and especially when the new advent is coming, the old one goes insane. That's usually more what's happening. That's where it goes. We know it in the past. It doesn't matter, of course, but she said the Baba was very pleased with some military operations of the Israelis. It's what this Israel is a tiny speck in all this ocean of Islam world. And while I was on Mehera's porch, I had this kind of feeling that I knew I'm a male. I think nobody told me, maybe they told everybody as a matter of fact that Mehera shouldn't be touched, and as a male, to say the least, I didn't feel even, well, I was obeying Baba, so if Baba gave me the opportunity of being close to Mehera, otherwise I would stay away a few kilometers as a male. Because I knew who she is, the purest soul in the universe, without reading anything. I knew who she was. And while I was in the porch, two things happened. First, I had this flute, I had a long flute. I'm playing a few musical instruments. And I had a wooden flute, a wooden flute, choir flute, side flute. So I was improvising something on the porch, and then I gave it to Mehera. I was holding the pipe with both hands, and I gave it to Mehera, and all the women were shouting, "Wow!" But Mehera knew. She knew what's going on here in my mind, and she put her hands in the middle, and for a few seconds, we were connected together.
Wow.
She knew what I'm up to. She, of course, I was completely transparent. And then, either before that or after that, she said something that was a very powerful way from her heart towards my person, which blew my mind. They had to take me away from there. It was something very powerful, she said, in front of everybody, but I don't feel I can repeat it. On behalf of us, something very powerful, some powerful wave came out of her heart. And I have a Meher Baba site of Israel. This is meherbabaisrael.com. And I have there the pictures of the letters. Mehera sent me about 8 letters. And it is on my website, the Israeli Baba website. If you want, maybe I can share it, or you can view it whenever you feel like. And I was told, of course, I was told that Meher was writing it. I don't know if she signed it or not. It seems like the same handwriting of Meher, but it was very, very, very personal. I used to write her letters and she would respond. One of the letters, she gave me an order, don't get involved with politics. It's not a question I'm suggesting, don't get involved with politics, period. So she gave me 2 orders in this life.
Wow, Etzion, so thank you so much for sharing those memories with Mehera. So we are winding down to the end of our several hours together. And I'm just going to ask each of us in closing, just take a nice deep breath and think about your own ties, links, stories, memories, and anything that comes up for you in your connection with Baba and Mehera. And just put your hand over your heart as you remember. and just request of them to keep the flame alive for you. So Jai Baba, everybody. Thank you.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Papa and Mehera.
Thank you,
Thank
Evie.
you.
Yeah, Baba.
Thank you, Evie. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Christine. Thank you all for the stories and shares.
Jai Baba.
Thank you, Mehera. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Uh,
Jai Baba.